priest found slaughtered in his church, the unsolved murder of Alfred Kunz. Before we dive in, kindly hit the subscribe button and let us know where you are watching from in the comment. The church was quiet. Too quiet. March 4th, 1998, began like any other morning in Dane County, Wisconsin. Winter still clung to the air. The roads were slick. The fields were pale and lifeless, waiting for spring. But inside St. Michael's Catholic Church in the small town of Dane, something was wrong. Very wrong. At 7 a.m., Father Alfred Kunz was supposed to start his day. He had his routine: Massachusetts confessions, meetings with parishioners. Everyone knew the priest was punctual. Everyone knew he was disciplined. He never ran late. But that morning he didn't show up. A friend, a fellow priest named Father Charles Fiore, grew concerned. Kunz had been expected for a radio recording that morning. He never arrived. No phone call, no excuse, just silence. Silence that felt heavy. Around 7 a.m., a teacher entered the school attached to the church. The building was dim. The teacher's footsteps echoed in the hallway. And then, something caught her eye. A body. On the floor. In a pool of blood. It was Father Alfred Kunz. He was lying in the hallway of the church school. His throat had been slashed. Blood stained the tiles. His glasses had fallen near him. His hand was outstretched, as if he had tried to fight back or reach for help. The scene was gruesome, brutal, shocking. This wasn't a natural death. This wasn't an accident. This was slaughter. Panic spread instantly. Police were called. Sirens tore through the quiet streets of Dane. The small farming community, where everyone knew everyone, suddenly became the center of horror. When officers entered the church, they froze. The crime scene looked more like something out of a nightmare than a holy sanctuary. Blood had spattered across the floor. The priest's body bore the clear mark of violence. His throat had been cut so deeply it nearly decapitated him. It was savage, personal. This wasn't a random attack. It was a message. The school children, who would have soon been arriving, were kept away. The church was locked down. Word spread quickly through the town. Parishioners cried. Neighbors whispered. Fear set in. Who could do this? Why would anyone want to kill Father Kunz? To understand the shock, you need to understand who Alfred Kunz was. He wasn't just a priest. He was a strong personality, a traditionalist, a man of conviction. He had been the spiritual leader at St. Michael's for more than 3 decades. People respected him. Some feared him, and some even hated him. Kunz was known for his devotion to old Catholic traditions, Latin Massachusetts' strict teachings. He resisted modern changes in the church that made him a controversial figure, even among his fellow priests. But he was also known as a counselor. People came to him with secrets, with sins, with stories they couldn't tell anyone else, and that, detectives would later realize, may have been the key to his death. Police stood over the body that morning and began to ask the most urgent questions. Who had been inside the church? Was there forced entry? Was anything stolen? Why was the priest attacked so violently? Detectives noticed something important. Nothing seemed missing. Not his wallet. Not church money. Not valuables. This wasn't a robbery. It was personal. Someone wanted Father Kunz dead. The killer had cut his throat with a blade. Not a gun. Not a blunt object. A knife. A sharp blade. And they had attacked with such force, it shocked even the most experienced investigators. Whoever did this was filled with rage. But why? The Dane County Sheriff's Department immediately launched a full-scale investigation. The crime scene was combed for evidence. Blood samples, fingerprints, footprints, anything. But there was almost nothing. The killer had left behind no obvious clues. No murder weapon was found. No clear trail. No sign of forced entry. It looked like the priest may have known his killer. Someone he trusted. Someone who had walked right in. The investigators began piecing together Father Kunz's final hours. The night before his death, Father Kunz had been seen alive. He had met with close friends. He had spoken about his usual duties. Nothing seemed unusual. But investigators soon learned something chilling. The night before his murder, Kunz had been speaking about dangers within the church. Corruption, scandal, sin that ran deep. And now, less than 12 hours later, he was dead. Coincidence? Or silencing? News spread quickly across Dane County. Priest had been murdered. And not just murdered, slaughtered. Parishioners gathered outside the church in tears. Some prayed. Some whispered theories. Some admitted they were afraid to even enter the church again. The small town was shaken. Crime like this didn't happen here. Certainly not in a church. Certainly not to a priest. The press swarmed in. Headlines spread. Priest slain in church. Brutal killing in Dane. Everyone wanted answers. But none came. Detectives began to look at everyone close to Father Kunz. Other priests, church staff, parishioners. Who had access to the building? Who had a reason to silence him? And quickly, rumors began to swirl. Some claimed it was a robbery gone wrong. But the evidence didn't match. Some whispered about occult connections. That Kunz had been investigating satanic practices. Others suggested church politics. That his traditionalist stance had made him enemies in high places. Every theory seemed possible. Every theory seemed sinister. The biggest mystery that first week was the missing weapon. Police searched the church, the grounds, the surrounding area. Nothing. The blade used to kill Father Kunz had vanished. And that made things more complicated. Because without the weapon, without DNA, without fingerprints, investigators had very little to work with. It was a ghost crime. Clean, precise, silent. The killer had come in, killed, and vanished into the night. For the parishioners, fear only grew. If a priest could be murdered in his own church, who was safe? Parents worried about sending their kids to the church school. Some families stopped attending services. Whispers of evil filled the town. And behind all of it was one terrifying truth. The killer was still out there. Someone in their small community had committed this crime. Someone who may have been sitting beside them in mass. Someone who smiled, prayed, and then slit a priest's throat. The thought was unbearable. The brutal killing of Father Alfred Kunz was just the beginning. Because as investigators dug deeper, they would uncover secrets. Secrets about Kunz's life. Secrets about the people around him. Secrets about the dark undercurrents within the church itself. And the question that haunted everyone would only grow stronger. Was this just a murder? Or was it something bigger? Something darker? Father Alfred Kunz wasn't an ordinary priest. Not by any measure. By the time detectives began digging into his past, they realized something unsettling. The priest's life wasn't just about mass, confessions, and prayers. It was layered, complicated, dangerous. To understand his murder, they needed to understand the man. The Catholic Church of the 1990s was divided. Some priests embraced modern reforms. English language Massachusetts liberal interpretations. A softer stance on old rules. But not Father Kunz. He clung to the old ways. The Latin Massachusetts. The strict rituals. The ancient traditions that others had abandoned. This earned him respect from traditional Catholics. But it also earned him enemies. Enemies inside the church itself. Whispers followed him. That he was outspoken. That he challenged bishops. That he didn't back down. He wasn't afraid to call out corruption. He wasn't afraid to speak about sin, even if it meant stepping on powerful toes. That kind of boldness can inspire, but it can also get a man killed. Every priest hears confessions. But Father Kunz was different. People didn't just confess sins. They brought him problems, scandals, dark secrets they couldn't tell anyone else. And Kunz kept those secrets. But the question was, did someone kill him to keep one of those secrets buried? Detectives learned that Kunz had been advising other priests, not just on spiritual matters but on sensitive scandals. He knew too much, he had seen too much, and if he ever spoke, it could ruin lives. That made investigators pause. Was his death connected to what he knew? One of Father Kunz's closest friends was Father Charles Fiore. Fiore was also a conservative priest, outspoken, bold. Like Kunz, he had strong views about the direction of the Catholic Church. The two often spoke about problems they saw within the clergy. Rumors of corruption, abuse, even satanic influence. Yes, satanic influence. Fiore later claimed that Kunz had been deeply troubled by what he believed was demonic activity creeping into the church. That he feared evil forces were not only attacking individuals but infiltrating entire institutions. It sounded sensational, but in the days after his murder, it didn't feel far-fetched. The way he was killed was almost ritualistic. Priest, his throat slit, in his own church. Was it symbolic? Was it meant as a warning? As investigators dug deeper, they discovered a pattern. Father Kunz wasn't universally loved. Some parishioners found him too strict. Some fellow priests thought he was too rigid. And some believed he was dangerous because of what he knew. His murder was beginning to look less like a random act and more like a targeted hit. But the suspects were everywhere. Was it someone inside the church? A parishioner with a grudge? A criminal he had counseled? The possibilities seemed endless. Soon, detectives heard disturbing whispers. Alfred Kunz had been investigating scandals in the Catholic Church. Serious scandals. There were rumors of financial corruption. There were rumors of abuse. And there were rumors of priests tied to immoral behavior. If Kunz had been gathering evidence, if he had been preparing to expose something, then his murder could have been an act of silencing, a cover-up. This wasn't just speculation. His close friends later said he had been preparing to clean house, that he was ready to take action against corruption in the church. But before he could, he was slaughtered. Coincidence? Or execution? Beyond the controversies, Father Kunz lived with discipline. He rose early. He followed routines. He dedicated his life to prayer and his parish. But discipline can create patterns. And patterns can make a man vulnerable. Detectives realized something chilling. The killer likely knew Kunz's routine. They knew when he would be alone. They knew where to find him. This wasn't random. It was calculated. The priest had been stalked, watched, and then struck down. Some investigators floated another theory. What if the killer wasn't a powerful figure? What if it was personal? What if someone had confessed something to Father Kunz, something terrible, and feared he would break confidentiality or reveal it indirectly? A priest's duty is to protect the seal of confession, but fear can twist the mind. What if the killer believed Kunz couldn't be trusted to keep silent? Or worse, what if Kunz confronted someone about a sin outside the confessional? That would make him dangerous. Meanwhile, the town of Dane grew restless. The parishioners didn't just lose a priest. They lost their anchor, their leader, their protector. And the way he died, it shook them to the core. Every conversation circled back to the same chilling question. Who would slit a priest's throat? The theories multiplied. Satanists, corrupt priest, a local enemy. Every face looked suspicious. And through it all, detectives struggled with the same frustration. No solid evidence. No DNA. No fingerprints. No weapon. Just whispers and shadows. The Catholic hierarchy tried to calm the community. They promised cooperation. They expressed sorrow. But behind the scenes, some investigators felt a different energy. Felt like doors were closing. Felt like people weren't talking. Was the church hiding something? Had Kunz uncovered something so dark, his own brothers in faith might have wanted him silenced? These weren't just wild theories. Detectives openly admitted they couldn't ignore the possibility. The weeks after the murder only deepened the mystery. No arrests, no prime suspect, just speculation. And then more unsettling details emerged. Some said Father Kunz had received threats. Some said he knew his life was in danger. Some said he had been looking over his shoulder in the weeks leading up to his death. If true, he may have known what was coming. But why didn't he say more? Why didn't he tell someone? Or did he? And they didn't listen? As investigators pieced together his final months, one theory began to terrify them. What if the killer wasn't just one person? What if it wasn't just a grudge? What if Father Kunz had stumbled into something bigger? A network? A conspiracy? A group willing to kill to protect itself. That would explain the silence, the missing evidence, the fear that gripped the parish. It wasn't just a murder. It was a warning. By the end of the first month, the case was already growing cold. But whispers of conspiracy refused to fade. Detectives knew they needed to go deeper, to examine every aspect of Kunz's personal life, every rumor, every shadow, because the key to solving his murder wasn't in how he died. It was in how he lived. And soon, investigators would stumble onto something darker, something that made the case spiral into terrifying territory. For more chilling true crime stories, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to the channel. Father Alfred Kunz's murder was brutal, but the brutality raised a question. Who hated him enough to kill him like that? The suspect list was long, and it only grew darker with every interview. Detectives started with the obvious. The people closest to him, friends, parishioners, fellow priests, because in murder cases, the killer is often someone familiar. But Father Kunz wasn't married. He had no children. He lived a life of celibacy. So investigators looked at his circle, and what they found shocked them. Some priests admired Kunz. Others despised him. He was too rigid for many, too outspoken, too willing to expose uncomfortable truths. Detectives learned that he had clashed with clergy over scandals. Financial scandals, abuse scandals, even whispers of satanic influence. He wasn't quiet about it. He named names. He made enemies. Enemies with power. Could one of them have silenced him? Then came the parishioners. Most loved him, but some didn't. Kunz demanded discipline. He was strict. Confession wasn't just a ritual, it was accountability. Some parishioners resented that. He had turned people away from communion. He had called out sins publicly. He had embarrassed those who strayed too far. Embarrassment can turn into hatred. Hatred can turn into violence. And then came the most chilling rumor of all, that Father Kunz had been targeted by Satanists. Yes, Satanists. Some said he had been investigating occult activity, that he was preparing to expose a group in Wisconsin, that his murder was ritualistic. Priest, his throat slit. The symbolism was too sharp to ignore. Was it just speculation or a real lead? Detectives couldn't dismiss it, because whispers of Satanism weren't rare in the 1990s, and Kunz himself had warned about it. If he was right, he may have paid the price. What frustrated detectives most was the crime scene. No fingerprints, no murder weapon, no clear sign of forced entry. The killer had walked in. The killer had walked out. Clean, precise. That suggested planning, not a random act. This wasn't rage. It was execution. And that meant the suspect was skilled or protected. Even Father Kunz's closest allies weren't immune from suspicion. One name surfaced quickly: Father Charles Fiore. He was Kunz's confidant, his ally in exposing corruption. But that closeness made detectives cautious. Did Fiore know too much? Could the friendship have soured? There was no evidence against him, but detectives couldn't rule him out. The truth was, no one could be ruled out. By the late 1990s, whispers of abuse within the Catholic Church were beginning to grow louder. Kunz knew about it. He was counseling victims. He was warning other priests. He may have been preparing to act. That made him dangerous, because if he exposed the wrong person, powerful reputations would crumble. Detectives wondered, was his murder connected to silencing those truths? If so, then the killer wasn't just a murderer. They were part of a system that wanted Kunz gone. Another dark possibility emerged. Father Kunz had allegedly been involved in exorcisms. He believed demonic forces were real. He believed they were attacking the church. Was he targeted by those who embraced that darkness? Some claimed he had been battling evil not just spiritually, but physically, and that evil had struck back. Detectives couldn't confirm it, but the theory haunted them. Another clue led investigators toward money. The parish wasn't rich, but there were funds, and wherever there is money, there can be greed. Detectives checked for missing funds, stolen accounts, financial disputes, Because maybe the killer wasn't driven by religion. Maybe it was greed. A priest who blocked someone from stealing. A priest who threatened to expose a financial crime. That could get him killed too. Then came a rumor no one expected. That Father Kunz had a close relationship with a young woman. Some said she was a teacher. Others said she was just a parish worker. The relationship may have been innocent, but rumors spread quickly. Could jealousy have played a role? Could someone have believed the priest was too close to her? Or could the rumor itself have been planted to mislead investigators? The truth was unclear, but it added another layer to the growing web of suspects. What troubled detectives most was the silence. People whispered, but few spoke openly. The community was afraid. Afraid of the church. Afraid of the killer. Afraid of what might be uncovered. That silence was deafening. It meant someone knew something, but fear kept them quiet. As the investigation stalled, one thought gnawed at detectives. What if the killer wasn't from Dane? What if the killer was brought in? Professional. Someone skilled. Someone who left no trace. That would explain the clean crime scene. That would explain the silence. If true, it meant the murder was ordered by someone powerful, and that power was terrifying. By the end of the first year, the suspect pool wasn't shrinking. It was growing. Clergy with grudges, parishioners with anger, victims of scandals, those who feared exposure, those who dabbled in the occult, those who wanted revenge. The case was drowning in shadows, and every suspect seemed darker than the last. As months passed, the town began to fracture. Some believed the church was covering up the truth. Others believed Satanists were behind it. Others still thought it was a local dispute gone violent. But no one agreed. The only certainty was that Father Kunz's killer was still free, and that freedom cast a permanent shadow over Dane. Detectives were trapped. Every lead collapsed. Every suspect slipped away. Every rumor added more confusion. The murder of Father Alfred Kunz was no closer to being solved. And then, just when investigators thought the case might fade, something surfaced. Something terrifying. Something that would take the case into an even darker place. Father Kunz's death wasn't just about a priest. It wasn't just about a church. It was about something larger, something hidden, something people didn't want exposed. And in the next phase of the investigation, detectives would stumble on the possibility that this wasn't just murder. It was ritual, it was symbolic, and it was a message written in blood. The murder of Father Alfred Kunz wasn't just brutal. It was chilling. It was symbolic. And soon, detectives faced a horrifying question. Was his death a ritual? When investigators first entered the rectory, the scene felt wrong. Kunz's body lay face down. His throat was slit from ear to ear. Blood soaked the floor. But it wasn't just the violence. It was the precision. The wound looked like it had meaning. Like it was performed for a purpose. Some investigators whispered it resembled ritual slaughter. A killing meant to send a message. But what message? Almost immediately, rumors spread through Dane. That Father Kunz had been murdered by Satanists. That his death was a sacrifice. The whispers weren't random. Kunz himself had spoken of Satanism. He warned about it. He preached against it. He even said the church was under spiritual attack. And now he was dead. His throat cut like an offering. Coincidence? Or prophecy fulfilled? To understand the fear, you have to go back to the 1980s and 1990s. America was gripped by satanic panic. Stories of cults. Stories of ritual abuse. Stories of human sacrifice. Most turned out to be exaggerations. But some didn't. And Father Kunz was one of the priests who believed the threat was real. He believed Satanists were infiltrating communities. He believed they were infiltrating the church itself. If that was true, then his murder was no random act. It was a ritual execution. March 3, 1998, the night Father Kunz was killed. He had been at school late. He spoke with a teacher. He left sometime after 10 p.m. By morning, he was dead. Detectives began piecing together the timeline. No signs of forced entry. No signs of robbery. nothing stolen. That suggested the killer wasn't there for money. They were there for something else. And the ritual theory grew stronger. The wound was deep, precise, clean. It resembled the kind of cut used in ritual animal sacrifice. A single slash across the throat, spilling life. Some investigators believed it wasn't just murder. It was symbolic death, the taking of a priest, a strike against the sacred. To those who feared the occult, the message was clear. This was a ritual sacrifice. One of Kunz's closest friends, Father Charles Fiore, believed the murder was spiritual. Fiore said Kunz was battling evil. He said Kunz was aware of threats. He said the church was under siege. Fiore didn't call it random violence. He called it war. A war between light and darkness. A war that claimed his friend. And he warned that Kunz's death was a warning to others. There were whispers that Kunz had performed exorcisms. Some said he was one of the few priests who still practiced them. Others said he counseled victims of possession. If that was true, then he wasn't just a priest. He was a warrior, and warriors make enemies. Had he angered those who worshipped darkness? Had his work drawn the attention of Satanists? If so, then his murder was more than personal. It was a statement. Then came another rumor, that Kunz had been working on a report for the Vatican. A report exposing corruption. A report exposing occult influence inside the church. If true, it meant his murder wasn't local. It was global, because if Kunz was preparing to reveal names, he was dangerous. And the timing of his death was too perfect. Just before he could expose the truth, he was silenced. In the most brutal, ritualistic way possible. Some detectives noticed something else. The crime scene seemed too clean, too careful, too staged. It looked like someone wanted investigators to believe it was ritualistic. But was that the truth? Or a diversion? Maybe it wasn't a cult. Maybe it wasn't Satanists. Maybe it was someone who wanted the world to think that. A staged ritual. A cover for a different motive. The murder weapon was never found. But the wound told a story. It was made with a sharp blade. Possibly a hunting knife. Possibly a ritual blade. Some experts said the cut resembled those made in animal sacrifices. Precise. Swift, intentional, not rage, not chaos, control. That was the most chilling part. Whoever killed Kunz was calm. They weren't panicking. They weren't sloppy. They knew exactly what they were doing. As rumors spread, the parish grew fearful. Was the church safe? Was the town safe? Would there be another killing? Some parishioners whispered of seeing strangers near the church. Others spoke of shadows moving at night. The fear wasn't just about the murder. It was about what it meant. If Father Kunz was killed by Satanists, then darkness had touched Dane. And it wasn't leaving. Even among detectives, opinions split. Some believed the ritual theory. Others dismissed it as hysteria. But the facts were strange. Priest. His throat slit. No robbery. No forced entry. It didn't fit a normal murder. Something deeper was at play. Soon, the case was drowning in theories. Satanists, angry parishioners, corrupt clergy, a jealous lover, financial disputes, or a staged ritual to cover something else. Each theory pulled detectives in a different direction. Each theory created more confusion. And with every passing week, the truth grew harder to see. But one possibility kept haunting investigators. That Father Kunz's death was a message. To priests who spoke out, to those who fought corruption, to those who resisted evil. The message was clear: stay silent, or this will happen to you. As months turned into years, the ritual theory never faded. It lingered, it haunted, terrified, because if it was true, then the killer wasn't just a murderer. They were part of something larger, something darker, and that meant Father Kunz's death wasn't the end. It was the beginning. The murder of Father Alfred Kunz left Dane in fear. It left investigators in confusion. It left the church in silence. But as time passed, one thing became clear. The case wasn't going away. The questions weren't disappearing. The theories weren't stopping. And in the final chapter, we'll confront the haunting legacy of Kunz's death. A legacy that still hangs over Dane. A legacy of silence, suspicion, and fear. And a question that refuses to die. Who killed Father Kunz? And why? The murder of Father Alfred Kunz remains unsolved. Decades later, the case still bleeds mystery. It is not just a crime story. It is a ghost. A ghost that refuses to leave Dane, Wisconsin. A ghost that haunts the Catholic Church. A ghost that whispers of secrets, silence, and shadows. In the beginning, investigators were confident. They believed they would find the killer quickly. But time worked against them. Days turned to weeks, weeks to months, months to years. And soon the trail went cold. But not forgotten. Even today, the murder of Father Kunz remains an active investigation. Yet, no arrests, no charges, no justice, only silence. For the people of Dane, the murder changed everything. This was a small town, safe, quiet, trusting. And then, one of their most respected men was butchered inside his own church. People stopped locking eyes with strangers. They looked over their shoulders at night. The parish was never the same. Every creak of the church, every flicker of a candle, every shadow in the pews, it all carried weight, as if the church itself remembered. The Catholic Church never fully addressed Kunz's murder. There were statements, there were condolences, but there was also silence. Some believe the church wanted the case buried. Some say Kunz knew too much. Some insist he was silenced for what he planned to expose. And the silence from the church only fueled suspicion. Because silence speaks. And in this case, it screamed. Detectives carried the case for decades. They chased leads. They interviewed suspects. They searched for evidence. But every path led to a dead end. No weapon. No confession. No solid suspect. Just whispers, rumors, and theories. One investigator admitted the case felt cursed. Another said it was like staring into darkness that never gave anything back. The weight of failure hung heavy, because when a priest is murdered, the world expects answers. And answers never came. Over the years, several names surfaced. A fellow priest, a school teacher, a jealous parishioner, an unknown drifter. Each was examined. Each was investigated. But none were proven guilty. Theories rose and fell like waves. But none ever touched shore. It was like chasing shadows. Shadows that disappeared when the light turned on. To this day, 3 theories dominate the case. The satanic ritual theory. That Kunz was killed as part of a dark sacrifice. That his murder was spiritual warfare. The cover-up theory. That he was silenced for what he knew about corruption inside the church. That his death was an execution. The personal grudge theory. That his killer was someone close, someone angry, someone who wanted him dead for reasons hidden in small-town secrets. Each theory has supporters, each theory has holes, but none can be dismissed. And that's what makes the case so maddening. There were whispers of people who knew more, people in Dane who saw something, people in the church who heard something, but fear kept them quiet. One woman said, "People are scared to talk. They know things, but they won't say a word." Fear ruled the town. Fear ruled the parish. Fear ruled the case. And fear is the perfect ally of silence. For those who loved Father Kunz, his murder left a hole that never closed. He was more than a priest. He was a teacher, a counselor, a friend. His parishioners remembered his dedication, his loyalty, his faith. But they also remembered the horror of how he died. And that horror overshadowed his life. Even in death, his legacy was tangled in blood and mystery. Why does this case still matter? Because it wasn't just a murder. It was a challenge to the church, a challenge to justice, a challenge to truth itself. If a priest can be slaughtered in his own church, and the killer never caught, what does that say? Says evil can win. Says silence can prevail. Says justice can fail. And that truth is terrifying. So many questions remain. Why was his throat cut so cleanly? Why was nothing stolen? Why was the crime scene so controlled? Did Kunz know his killer? Did he let them inside? Did he trust them? Was the killer from Dane? Or did they come from far away? Was this personal? Or was it ritual? No one knows. And maybe no one ever will. Dane still waits for answers. Parishioners still whisper about that night. Families still remember the horror. And the church where Kunz died still stands. Every time someone walks past, they remember. Every time the door creaks open, they wonder. Every time the night grows silent, they fear. The town carries the weight, and it always will. The greatest tragedy of the Kunz case isn't just the murder. It's the silence that followed. No closure for his parish. No justice for his family. No truth for the church. Just silence. And in that silence, evil lives. Father Alfred Kunz's murder is more than an unsolved crime. It is a symbol of unanswered questions, a symbol of fear, a symbol of the darkness that sometimes hides inside the holiest places. His death echoes beyond Dane. It echoes across the church. It echoes in every whispered theory, every unanswered question, every lingering fear. And it forces us to ask, what are we afraid of? The truth? Or the silence that covers it? The murder of Father Alfred Kunz remains unsolved. No arrest, no justice, only questions. Was it a ritual sacrifice? A cover-up? Personal vendetta? We may never know. But one thing is certain. This story is not finished. It lives on. It waits. And it watches. Because the truth has a way of surfacing. And when it does, it will shake everything. For more chilling true crime stories, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to the channel.